everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Caroline. I am a psychiatry trainee. I am a mom of 3 and 1 on the way. I came up with this channel basically to talk about my journey through parenting, motherhood, and everything in between. So today I just want to talk about my CASC exam experience. I mean, everyone's experience is unique, so I feel everyone should speak their story, should say their story. My story and my CASC journey began in May 2022. I began preparing for my first CASC attempt in May 2022. The resources we used at that time mostly was the Maudsley Trainee Guide to CASC, and I really enjoyed using this. We began by practicing just 2 days a week because we began quite early. We began preparing in May when the exam was in September. So we had some good time to prepare. So we began with Maudsley and we did it from the front to the back. And then towards the exam, we built up momentum and we began practicing literally every day just prior to the exam. Unfortunately, towards the exam, I then realized that there was a resource called SPMM that I hadn't used at all. It had some stations that were quite unique, honestly, and having seen them, I began panicking towards the exam because they didn't make sense to me, having been using mostly the Maudsley for my practice. So the exam comes, I do it, and unfortunately I only pass 10 stations when the minimum number of stations that you need to pass was 12. So I failed 6 stations. My reflections now, looking back on why I failed that first attempt, my first reflection is look through all the possible resources if you can as early as possible. But even then, when I look back, for me, the 2 resources that I highly recommend were the Maudsley Guide Trainee Guide to the CASC exam, and then the SPMM booklet. The latest booklet that you can come across is what you should use because they keep updating this every year. So if I was to go back and prepare for this exam, those would be my 2 main resources I would use. But because I failed, I panicked. So I also looked through there's another book that I used. It's called Get Through the CASC exam. It's also nice because it structures you on how to approach the exam, but it's kind of outdated. So those were the 3 main resources I used. But if you're short of time, use the Maudsley and then the SPMM booklet. And if you're really short of time, just use the SPMM booklet. And of course, the number 1 trick is practice. Personally, again, on reflection, I am gifted. I have very good communication skills. For me, I never had to worry about that. But if you're out there and you know your communication skills is not as strong as you think they are, then please practice with as many people as possible because they'll point out the different areas in which you need to improve. The other tip that I can give for the CASC exam is you do not have to show empathy all through the exam. Show empathy, genuine empathy at the beginning of the task, and the rest of that 6 minutes focus on fulfilling the task. Now for me, what happened is, because I know I have excellent communication skills, I ended up overshowing empathy and communication skills, and then I never had time to actually complete the task in my first attempt. So in my second attempt, I revised that and I chose to focus on the task at hand in my next exam. So I redid the exam again in January 2023 and I passed 15 stations out of 16 stations and I scored over 80% in most of my stations. So I really scored highly. But again, I keep telling people my second attempts cannot be compared to people's first attempts, because for me, I passed my last 2 exams, paper B and CASC, I passed them on second attempt. So by the time I passed the second attempt, I already have like a 50% background of knowledge for the exam. But if you're doing this for the first time and you really want to pass it, these are things I highly recommend. If you have money, please pay for a course. There are several courses out there, but the highly rated courses are the SPMM course and then the Oxford course. I did not have access to that amount of money to pay for those courses because they are quite expensive. They are over £1,000. I couldn't afford that because we are juggling a family of 5 people and then having to pay for this amount of money for the course on top of the exam money. I couldn't afford it, so I didn't pay for a course. But if you can afford it, I highly recommend you pay for a course. But if you can't afford to pay for a course, this is what I suggest you do. Start preparing early, ideally 3 months prior to the exam, 3 to 4 months before the exam. Depending on how confident you are in your knowledge base, start preparing early. Build your knowledge base in all the possible tasks possible. Know the task well. For example, let me give an example. Lithium. Know your lithium in and out. Know the side effects, how to advise the mom. And for me, my resource for these explanation stations were the NHS leaflets. The NHS leaflets for patients are very nice because they explain the medication to the patient in the language the patient understands. One of the challenges I found for me was because I have studied in English from when I was young. I thought that the common English we study in schools is common English everyone understands here in the UK, but surprisingly you will find that some of the common jargons we use are not understood by the common native English speaker. So that means you need to familiarize yourself with the way the information is branded or written in the leaflets so that you learn how to explain to patients. And then the other thing is, if you can, please practice with as many native English speakers as possible. They'll be able to pick up small nuances in the way you communicate and help to correct you, because some of the culture nuances we don't know them. We've grown up in a whole different country altogether. So if you're a non-native English speaker like I am, or if you've been trained in a different country like I am, practice for this exam with native English speakers. It will do a lot for your CASC exam. And then the other thing that I want to communicate is, as much as you read, do not spend so much time on reading and compromise on practice. You might read all this information, and then when you come to practice, you feel like you have all this information, you know the station, but you remember you're supposed to deliver this information in 7 minutes. So then you find that the 7 minutes pass by and you haven't even given the patient all this goodness that you have in your heart. So please, as much as you read, practice, find a balance between having the knowledge as well as practicing delivering that knowledge in 7 minutes. There's so much I had in my head about what to give you about the CASC exam, but all you need to know in summary is start practicing early. Practice with a native speaker. SPMM and the Maudsley Guide were my go-to resources for this exam. Remember, balance your knowledge and reading and practice at the same time. Don't do too much of one. And then, of course, finally, I wish you all the best. I hope you pass this exam. It's a very expensive exam, and I know how you feel. You want to pass this exam in the first attempt. That's what I wanted. If by any means you do not pass it in the first attempt, do not despair. Please do the next sitting. Do not postpone the exam, because you already have this baseline knowledge, you have this background knowledge that will help to propel you to pass the next sitting. Do you have any questions about the CASC exam? Feel free to ask me in the comment section below, and I'm happy to answer. Bye.